whatever data like that is stored, you don't want to store it on the browser, right? You don't want people to see your private data. So what you do instead is you store it on a different computer on at a different place, and you access it via something which is called as the API, application programming interface. So all this thing is taken care by the backend actually. So what it does is it accepts a request from the front end, and then it processes the data from the database, either fetches the data or upgrades the data, then deletes some record based on whatever the user is wanting based on the request, and then gives a response back to the front end, which is being shown to you in the user side. Okay, so the user doesn't directly like comes in contact with the backend or the database, but it comes how it does is it basically comes via API, application programming interface. So don't worry if you're still confused, we'll go over many examples that will clear you out. So we are starting with the concepts this time so that you get a good hold of why you need certain things before you start coding. Okay, now, so okay, why do we need backend? So let me give you some use cases. Are you dealing with login forms, or maybe trying to like maybe VTop login, Amazon login, anything? Are you dealing with that? Then you need a backend. Are you dealing with real-time changing data? For example, if you are browsing some stock websites, stock market websites, their data changes very frequently based on every minute or second. Their stock prices change very frequently. So how do you think that is done? Do you think on the front end the people every second they write the data? No. So the database is stored somewhere else that is being frequently updated, and the person who the like us who are seeing the application, they are seeing it via the fetch request. So what our front end is doing is basically accessing our backend or our database through our API, and then it shows the results. That is what is real time. So if you are doing anything that requires data, or that encompasses fetching from database, writing to database, all of that stuff, then you need a backend for your site. Okay. Similarly, are you requiring authentication, or do you want to handle data privacy? Then backend comes into play. We'll go through more of this stuff in this. So if you're just having any doubts, feel free to stop me in between. Okay. Let's see this graph. What it shows us, this is basically the request response cycle. Okay, so this is your front end. This is a user who, let's say, like a normal user who is surfing Amazon. This is the internet or the web, and this is the server. This is the database. So if I just go to amazon.com, amazon.in, so you see when I just typed amazon.in here, it took some time, right? Like it's still loading. The site is loading. So what do you think? All of this data, is it like something already stored on the site? No. So this processing time that you see, it's because your front end is making a request to the database. Like, see, I'm already logged in here. It's my account. So what it is doing is it's basically passing this data into the backend server. It's saying that, okay, this user is logged in. Fetch me his details. Like, okay, these are the stuff that I've brought. So he's showing me all the buy again. So this is what is fetched from the database, and it is being shown to me. So if you go to your amazon.in, you might not have these items, because that is what differs from everyone, right? And see, this is what is basically backend. So what you do anytime you do a request, when you surf any website that covers backend, so they will have user specific data. So if you are having any data, like if you have logged in, that will like your user interface will be different from someone else's user interface. This is what is been taken care by backend. Then pick where you left off, all of this kind. So it differs from everyone. So what happens in the server is, in this front end, we are actually making a request to amazon.com, okay, or amazon.in. And what this does is it directly doesn't open you amazon.in and show you here itself. So if you're thinking that I'm typing, let's say you are here and you're typing amazon.com, and you're thinking that you're getting the result right here, that is not the case. So when you're typing amazon.in, it basically transfers it into a request that is called a http request. Okay, and that request is being passed over to the server of Amazon via the internet. And then the server analyzes, okay, what is it that I have got a request to amazon.in, what is the home page, and then is the user authenticated. Let's say if I log out and I again try amazon.in, so what it will say me is, it will just say me that login. It will ask me to log in, right? Since I'm already logged in, that data is being passed in this request, and it goes to the server. So the server analyzes basically, okay, what current situation do I have the like the my user wants to access the amazon.in homepage, and he's already authenticated. Okay, now what do I do? I go into the its database. I find, let's say my username is Bileshwar. Okay, I've logged in via Bileshwar. So what the server does, it basically reads the database records. Database should have all those records like a username, ID, password, and then whatever the items that I have brought. All of that in different columns, right? So if this the server takes care of that, it searches for the key called it searches the database with a key called as, let's say, username equal to Bileshwar. So by that it fetches a record, right? Bileshwar, like these are the items that he has ordered. This is the last item that he has visited. All of that stuff. Okay. So what the server does now is it gets that data from the database, and then it passes back a response through the same route to the user in the front end. So all of this happens in milliseconds, and what you are seeing is whenever you're tapping Amazon.in, so it goes as a request, it goes to the server, server fetches the data from the database, database back to the server, and then it passes on the response to the front end. So all of that happens in milliseconds when you just go into this. Okay, so this is how anything works in the internet, like any dynamic sites work in the internet. Okay, now let's go to API. API is basically application programming interface. Okay, it allows us to connect. Like the full form is application programming interface. What does it mean? Is it basically gives us an interface which allows us to connect different apps. Okay, it basically allows you to integrate your front end to the back end. Let's say in the same app, this is your front end, right? And this is your back end. Let's say the server is your back end. So how do you basically connect these two? So the connection between these two is something that is called as API. Let's say this is the internet, and basically this is how it happens in an API, application programming interface. So it lets you read the database, the server, everything with something called as API. Okay. So it has endpoints and URLs that allows the front end to connect with the backend. So similar, like let's say in the front end, you have this thing called as Amazon.in, right? This is what you have in the front end. But when you make a request to this site, your front end makes another request to the backend. And let's say that would be something very similar. Okay, what I can do is I can open the network tab. If I open the network tab in my console and I just do, I know there would be a lot of requests, but let's see. We'll just see what happens actually. So the network tab basically shows you every request and response that has been sent and received whenever you visit a URL. Okay, so you can see in very huge applications like Amazon and all, there are so many requests and responses. You have no idea like what is happening. But I just try to, if you go to a simpler site, let's say very simple site, it doesn't do anything. You'll have a simple request that is being sent to the server, and then the response that you get. So if I just do another click on Amazon.com, you can see, okay, the first one that you saw was Amazon.com, and then you can see there is a flooding of requests that has been sent and response you've got. So all of these data, let me find, okay, is very, there is, you can see these are secure applications, right? So they do a lot of comparisons, validations on the back end. So there is no end to the URLs. But let's say this Amazon, let's assume this, okay, can you see this HTTP, this link? This says that https unagio.amazon.com/1/events, then /com.amazon.com, then something like that. So what you see here, do you see? So you don't see these links, right? You don't visit these links when you are going to Amazon.com or Amazon.in. You just type Amazon.in, and what your front end or this code on which is running on your server or running on your browser, what it does, it basically makes requests, like lot of requests like this to the backend that is served. So this is one, you can see this in the request that whatever it has sent that this is the payload that it has sent. Let's say Amazon.in, then has to, I don't know what they are using, that's different for everyone. So you can see this is the data. You can see this is the URL that I entered, right? So this is being passed from your front end port to your backend. And the backend here you can see is unagi amazon.com/1/event. So there are a lot of links to that. So maybe it performs some particular action before your Amazon.in loads on the front end. Okay. So what happens basically if you go to this slide again? It's basically if you do Amazon.in, it then goes to your server. Server is like, okay, it goes to the server via the API, right? So I told you API is something called as, okay, let's go here. API is something called as endpoint, right? Endpoint or URL. So this is basically that endpoint. This is basically this endpoint, that https unagi.com, so this is an URL, right? So this URL allows your front end to talk with the database or to talk with the backend. So this is what is called an API, application programming interface. So this URL, which is not generally visible to the users, allows your front end, and it integrates your front end to the back end basically. Okay. So if we go to this request response cycle again, so when you do amazon.in, it then your browser runs a code. It like accesses the API via this unagi.com that I showed you, that endpoint. Then it talks to the server via that endpoint, and then if you go into the server, then it performs whatever the action that you want to do. Like in this request that you have passed on, what you want to do basically, you just want to see your Amazon homepage, and within that request you are also passing that I'm authenticated, like I'm logged in as an Amazon user, and I want to see my amazon.in homepage. So this is what your browser sends to your server via that API route or API endpoint or API URL, and your server reads that data. It talks with the database. It sees that if Beleshwar, something, some user called as Beleshwar, does it exist? If it exists, then fetch me all its details, like his past order and all. Then it stores that. Then what it does is it passes on a response from the server to the front end. So this is how your cycle goes on. Let me know if you have any doubts in this, guys. Is it clear?
Yeah, bro.
Clear, bro. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll have also many examples now, because this is very time. Oh, this is like you should understand how things work on the web before starting coding. Okay, example time. So, oops, did I miss some slides? It seems like I missed a slide. Uh, no problem. Let me show you this. Okay, so this is just my blog page. I'm not doing any promotion or something. This is, I just want to show you the difference between a dynamic site and a static site. So here, if you just go to this site, go to this site and then go to Amazon. Open it in two tabs. Okay, we'll analyze what happens. So let's go to this site first. So do you think how much time? Let's say how much time does it take to load? Okay, it takes very few time. Okay, and then what are all these things? These are my static black blog post. If I open any sample blog post, okay, so all of these things that all of these things that is written, do you think it is changing? It's not, right? It's something that I wrote on 26 January 2022, which is a year back. So if, let's say, if I want to change anything in this, so what do I have to do? I have to go to its source code, which is maybe hosted in my GitHub. Then I will change some certain lines and all. Then I will save it. Then this thing will again, it will take some time. The actions will load, and then your this. Let's say I have changed this. I'll just delete this line. So I'll go to its source code. I basically go to this HTML file. You can see a quantumleap.html. I'll go open this HTML file. I'll delete this first record, this first thing, and then what I'll just reload this page, and you can see all of this will work except the first line. So this is a static site. Okay, this doesn't require any backend. So all of these things, these are, everything is pre-written. Okay, it doesn't has any user authentication or something. It doesn't show you different pages if you are logged in or something. Okay, it doesn't have any data. Basically whatever data it has, it is static. Like, let's say at certain, like at this point of time, like at 9:30, this all this data is static. It doesn't change. So if you want to change it, you can go to its source code and change, but it doesn't change in a real time basis. Okay, now if I go to this Amazon site, as I already showed you, so if I just go all this, let's say, let's search for laptops. So this is the result what you get, right? These are the list of everything. So this is also a site. So in this, if you perform a search operation laptop, do you think you will get the same result if you do it again after 30 minutes, like this Fujitsu laptop on top, or then Xiaomi notebook pro on second? Do you think? Or even if I do in a let's say incognito search, do I get the same result? You can see I just did an incognito search, and here it's showing Xiaomi Notebook Pro is on top. It's the same thing, the in Amazon.in laptops. And if I'm doing it with my authorized user, it's showing me this. So do you have any idea why does this happen? So this is what is basically your dynamic site. It deals with your website with different users, like on the based on your data. So if you're logged in, it shows you different result on the same page. Like if I search laptops, it shows me different result. Maybe it may not be different, but yeah, the order and all, like the page, it's different, right? And if I'm not logged in, I'm just a random stranger, I'm searching laptops, so it shows me different thing. So this is how your backend basically works. So this is your dynamic side. It shows you different routes based on whatever data that you are trying to, like are you authorized, or what specific data do you want to access. Based on that, it shows you different thing. But if I go to this site, I open it here, and the same thing I open it on my incognito. Will it give me any different result? Absolutely not. It's the same thing. It will just show me all the exact same thing. So this is the difference between a static website and a dynamic website, which has a backend server and all, and a database backend server, all those running. And this is nothing but just a simple static website with just a front end. This is just a front end website. This is something with a backend. I hope this was clear. The first example was clear, right, guys? Any doubts?
No, bro, got it, got it.
Okay, great. Just please. Now let's go to another example. And this will clear you that why do you need backend basically? Why do you need backend? Okay, let's say, okay, let me just do. Let me open online GDP again. Okay, you can find this code in here in GitHub. If you go to GitHub, if you go to your backend folder, inside illustration, it has in no API.py and with API. Okay, these are the two codes that I'll be showing you now. Sorry about the internet. Okay, let me just go for Python. Let me do this username pass. Let me. Okay, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you why you need a API or a database on a separate machine. Okay, instead of the same machine. So let's try to make a login form just with a Python code. Okay, just a simple. Let's assume that we're making a login form in HTML. Okay, so we are doing username pass. Let's create a dictionary, and then we'll be storing the name. Like this is my username, and the password is 123 something. Then another user, and the password is 456. Then another user, and the password is something like that. Okay. So let's say that I have this is my database. Okay. Let's treat that this is my database. I have three records, which this is the username and this is the password. Cool. So what I will do now is I'll just print hello. It's time for authentication. Now what I'll do is, let's say I'll print, okay, I'll just accept username. Uname equals input, enter user, enter your username basically. Okay, the username, and then password. I'll also create a password. Input, enter your password. Now I have the user to enter his password, username and password. Now I want to check that is the user authenticated or not. Like basically, do we have his records in our database or not? So what I'll do, I'll just run through my dictionary for keys in user. I hope you guys know Python. I'm just traversing the dictionary. Then I'm checking if my uname equals let's say keys. That is basically the key. Like I'm checking the is my username equal to Beleshwar or not, and then I'm checking is it password also correct or not. So let's say pass equals username dot pass, and then I'll just do pass or not, sorry, keys. Yeah, So I'm basically checking is the username. Do I have? I'm traversing through these records and I'm checking. Do I have something called as this thing entered by the user as username, and do I have its corresponding password or not? If so, just print that. Okay, right, you are in the you're authenticated basically. Cool. Now, if all of this thing doesn't happen, let's say that it travels through the whole dictionary and didn't get any match for both of the records respectively, I just want to return that print. Sorry, we do not have you in our database. Okay. Now let's run this. Let's just assume this is don't forget the source code. Let's just assume this is your website. Okay, it's asking for your login credentials. So let's assume this is your Facebook page and it's asking you for your login credentials. So I'll just go ahead. If I'm the right user, I know my username and password. So I'll just give my username. I'll give my password, and then oh, it says you're authenticated, but it also prints this. This shouldn't be happening. Just a second. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this shouldn't be printing though. Yeah, if this is happening, then I'll do something. Let's try this. Okay, so what it does is, let's say this is my web page. Okay, this is my Facebook credentials. I know I'm an authorized user. I know my username. I know my password. And when I enter this, let's say that okay, I have been logged in. This is what it says. Now let's say someone will also try it with something that is not there. Let's say this thing. Okay, it says me that sorry, we don't have you in our database yet, so you can't sign in basically. Now let's say that I am a malicious person. Okay, if we do something, if we implement our application something like this, let's assume that all of our database, all of our checking our logic, everything is in the front end. This is our front end, right? So everything, if everything is in our front end, what a evil guy can do is he can just basically read the source code. So if he reads the source code, he finds that okay, this is the database. So I know all the user who is there in the database. So what I can do is, even if I'm not Belisho, I can just read this file. I can read your database, and then whenever I go to your Facebook, I just go with Belisho, and then it will also show me that okay, I'm authenticated. So if so this thing doesn't give you any privacy or your security, right? It basically exposes all of your database, all of your logic. Even this is your logic, right? This is your logic, that how you are checking that if a user has its database or not, like his authentication credentials are correct or not. So all of this you're just giving it directly to your like what you like you're just giving it to your anyone who is viewing your front end. You're just showing it publicly. So this is your flaw basically. So this is where your backend comes in, or something like you called this API comes in here. What we try to do is we will declare, we'll just make another app. Let's call this is api.py. Okay, then we don't want our database to be publicly visible, so we'll just do this thing. We'll keep our database here, and then all the logic that we are doing, this logic, uh, we shouldn't be doing this. Let's entirely cut this out. We don't want our logic to be shown to the user, right? Everything is in our backend. Now this is our API, this is our backend. Let's assume that the user, like the malicious person, can't read this api.py. Okay, this will happen when this is hosted somewhere else in someone else's computer. Just assume as of now this api.py is somewhere else. Like this is the only file that he is able to read. So now what I'll do is, let me define a function, def check user. Okay, and then it accepts your uname and it accepts your password, and then what it does is it implements this code. I know how to indent code in Vim, but not in online compilers. So forgive me for that. Else we'll do that here. So since it's a function, we are not actually printing. See, this printing part and all, this shouldn't be in your backend. It should be all in your front end, right? Because all these things that you see, these are all your stuff in front end. So I will not actually print here, but I will just return. Let's say I have function in the backend. I will just return that. Okay, this user is now authenticated. I will return true. And if he is not, I'll just return false. Now this is my code, this is my logic and my database, this is my database and this is my logic. Now this is in my backend now. Okay, let's assume this code is running somewhere else in my remote server that no one knows. Now if I come to my front end, what I will just do is I will just from API import check users. So this is the name of my Python file, right? So I'm just importing it from here, and then I'm just importing the name of the function check user, and okay, I'm printing this. I'm taking the inputs. Now what I'm doing is if check user, and I will pass the uname and pass d. If it's true, then what I will print. Okay, you hooray, you are authenticated. And if it's not, I just print sorry, you are not in our data. Okay, now let's run the code. It's time for authentication. You can see the interface, like this is what it is visible to any normal person, right? So it's still the same. So if I do Beleshwar here and if I do 123 here, it will still show me that I'm authenticated. But now when I've introduced my backend and my API, my code is very secure. So if let's say I am a malicious person, I don't know what is going on. I don't if let's say my real name is something like this. I just run it again, something like this, and my password is this. So it shows you, right? I'm not in the DB. But now, even if I see your database, even if I see your code, sorry, even if I see your source code, I have no idea like where is your database. You're just basically calling this function, but where is it being called? So where it is, you do have no idea. Let's say this API.py is not here. It's just showing that it's importing something check user function from API, and then it's the logic, whatever it is doing in the database, nothing is visible. It's just showing that it's taking the input and then calling the function, and based on its output, it's printing. So you're now the malicious person doesn't know what is my user, like what is the credentials of Belashur and his password. Now he can't log in. Okay. So I hope this like example was clear, guys. Others, guys, any doubts?
No, bro.
Okay, great. So this is something now you should understand what is like why do we need backend and what is like backend. Okay, so you should understand what is API, what is backend, and why do we need it, why it is important. So since now we know all of this stuff, now let's start with code. Just give me a second. Screen share. Just a second, guys. Okay. I hope my screen is visible, right? Yeah. Okay. Now let's come to some more concepts. Mm, okay. Course. What is course? Is basically it's something in your backend. It says it stands for cross origin resource sharing. Okay. So it allows your browser to receive and send data from different URLs and server. Let's say let's see this example. Let's say your client like okay, like I'm the user and I'm in currently in Chrome and I'm like using this foo.com, something called as foo.com. Okay, and my server is also in this foo.com. Okay, like I showed you this example, right, where my database and my logic, everything was in the single code. So this is the example of that code. In this case, your browser will not give you any error. So it will just run, it will process everything, like it will give you the desired response. Okay, but in the same thing, if I have my client in, let's say, in foo.com and my server in something called as bar.com, like this is how it generally happens. Okay, so if you remember that api.py file, let's say I have hosted it on a different server, which should be happening also. Okay, so in this case, your browser will not work. Basically it will say that I don't know what is bar.com, and how am I going to share my data from foo.com to bar.com. So it won't generally allow you. So this is where CORS come in. So CORS stands for cross origin resource sharing. Okay, so this is one origin, this is one origin, and you are now sharing the resources. So if you just basically if you enable your CORS, this certain functionality will work. Okay, so this is something that you have to keep in your mind when you're writing Flask code. Okay, to enable CORS. Let's say you have a React front end running here in localhost 3000 and your Flask backend running here in localhost 5000. And if you want both of them to integrate, so that won't happen unless you activate your CORS. Like you said that okay, CORS has been enabled on this route. If you do that, then it will work. So this is just small concepts. Now, if you go to a request, okay. Now, this request and response are some things that you will hear many times in networking, okay. So, whatever you do on your Chrome or whatever you do any browser, whenever you visit any URL or do anything, that happens via request. So, basically, you're making a request to the server, to something that is served, any website. If I'm going to Amazon or any website, whenever I'm clicking on this, whenever I click enter, I'm basically making a request that okay, server, give me the output, whatever is hosted in this site, and your server is gives you a response that is called as response. So that is basically request response. I hope that is clear actually. So we'll go to what are the different types of methods in request that will come soon. So this is how your sample request looks like. This is your HTTP method that you go ahead, and this is your URL. Let's say in Amazon this should be amazon.com, and this is your HTTP version that it uses, basically 1.1, that is very common. And these are other attributes that you keep along, like host. Let's say okay, host will basically be amazon.com, and in slash, if you want to visit some inner pages or hidden pages or anything like that, that will come here. Let's say if I go to something like that, amazon.in slash orders. So your orders, this is basically called a URI, not URL. This is called URI, and this is where it stands in your this spot. And then accept language, all this user agent, all of that stuff. So let's, I'm not diving more into the architecture of request and response, but I'm just showing you that how it happens. So whenever you just go to amazon.in or something, this is how this is basically what is transferred to your, is transferred from your browser front end to its backend. And then your backend responses gives a response to your front end with this format, and same HTTP version. And this is the status code. We'll come to know what is status code also. It says okay, okay, I mean okay, I'm authorized to use, like okay, this website is working, like whatever you have requested, the client, whatever you have requested, it is up and running. So now I'm giving you back the response. So date and all, server and all, content, and this you can see this content length, right? 88. So this is what basically shows you, like whatever content you receive from the server, that the length is 88 of that. And then what is the type of that? It's basically text or HTML, and then kind of that. So this is how a response looks like. And once your response is back to your client side, you can view the page. Okay. Now coming to methods, HTTP methods. So a get method is first coming to the get. So what is a method is basically it allows you to access a URL in different ways. Like there are tons of methods. If I go to HTTP methods, there are a lot, but basically what you'll need to focus on is get and post as of now for beginners level. So get is basically very like insecure, like it's the simplest method, you can simplest way of accessing a site, you can say. Like whenever you open something, right, I'll just do anything, whatever you open, this is basically a get request. I'm making a get request. So get is used to view get the whatever is hosted in that site at the very simplest level. It gives you this read, basically you're just reading whatever is in that site. Okay. And what post does is it basically gives you from your front end, it passes on some data to the back end. Basically you want to, let's say when you do this thing, right, if I go to Facebook now, see, if I go to this website, this URL, this is a GET request. Okay, I'm basically saying what is in the Facebook, this page, whatever it has taken. This is a GET request. But if I do all this, I put all my details here, and give my details, all of that, male, female, whatever. And then if I click on sign up, this will be a post request. This is because I want I want to alter the contents in the database, or view it, fetch it, then validate it, all of that stuff. Basically, if you're passing some data from your front end to your back end, that can be done through post request. Okay, I hope it's clear. Let's say if you're just simply viewing Amazon.in, you are not passing any data, right? You are just saying, okay, I want to see what is in my home page. But if you are, let's say, ordering, or doing your payment, you are basically sending your credentials, or what do I say, yeah, your access card, your OTP, basically, if you are doing that. So you're actually sending some data from your side to the backend. So that is done by a post request. Okay, so I hope the difference is clear between get and post. If you want to view the data, change the data, alter it anyhow, post is a bit, you can say it's a bit more secure way of accessing pages. So if you're passing any data with you from the front end to the back end, you have to use something called as the post method. And if you're just viewing it, whatever is there, the static thing, you can say reading the files, you can use the get method. Okay, so this is basically HTTP methods. If you go to this thing, if you see this request, you can see this is the method, right? So that is what is the method. I know these are a lot of concepts, right? It's been 50 minutes, but it's important before you like understand stuff. It's if you don't understand what you're doing, it doesn't make sense, right? Now, response code. Similarly, when you in your request you pass the HTTP method, but in your response, what you get is the codes. Basically, it shows you the status of the request. Okay, whatever the client was requesting, is it available? If it is available, I'll just give a successful response. So successful response codes are between 200 to 200 299. Okay, and let's say the site is not available. Okay, so then I will like the error responses. The error responses are between 400 to 499 response codes. Okay, so this code, by the help of this code, we can analyze a lot of data. Like, let's say if we get a 200 thing, we get a 200 response code, we basically mean that whatever we requested, I have that. Okay, my now site is basically running. So if I get a 400 response, like you must have heard this common thing, right? 404 site not found. Even if I can show you, I have, if I do this thing, you can see this, right? 404. So it's very common. 404, it basically says that this resource is not found. So this is basically your response code. This your server, whenever you visited this site in your server, this server has told me that, okay, there is nothing called as IODD URI in this URL. Like, there is nothing on something like this. So it will say you file not found, and it will return you this 404 response. So these are the two main responses that you need to take care. This is successful responses between 200 to 300, like 299, and error is from 400 to 499. And if you have some error on the server side, then it will give you 500 response scores. Okay, you'll get to know this. Don't confuse. Like, if there is error on the server side rendering, you get something like error response codes between 500 to 599. And redirection. Okay, if you have how do you must have gone through some sites where, let's say, you have not logged in and you're accessing it, you'll be redirected to the login page, right? So in that case, whatever the response code that you get is between 300 to 399. That tells you that it's basically redirection. So if you want to access some inner content without authentication, it redirects you to the login page, right? So this response codes take care of that, and some more. So what you need to take care of is successful response code 200 to 299, and then client error. These are the major stuff, 400 to 499. Okay. Now, JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's how your data is passed from the front end to the back end. Okay. So if you remember something called as object that I covered in JavaScript, it's basically a data type where it starts with this curly braces, and then the properties is when it's named as employees, and then it is the value is accessed, like value is put into that this property. But now this value is a list, right? In this list, I have again the objects. So it's actually confusing, but don't confuse it. So if you want to pass any data from front end to back end, it basically sends in the data type format of object, JavaScript object, right? So that's why it's called JavaScript Object Notation, JSON. So whatever data you pass from the front end to back end, it generally goes. Let's say I want to pass my employees and their first names, like what are the different employees I have and their first name and last name. I can't simply just do it this way. Like, okay, I have this employees database, then I'll do this employees dot all, fetch all, something like that. If I have a function that fetch all, and I can't just pass it to the backend simply like this. I have to format it in the format of JSON like this. So it's kind of a standard way, how to pass data and all. So once you pass it via JSON here in the backend, you can pass the JSON. Like pass basically means you are reading it, so you can read the JSON and then you can extract the whatever data that you need. Okay. So till now, any doubt? These are some of the concepts that you need to get started with backend stuff. Any doubt, guys? Anywhere you're still stuck at? If not, then we can continue. If you're stuck at, feel free to stop me. Okay. Okay. Now this PPT boring stuff is ended. Now let's go to our code. Now I just, if you want to follow along as well, in this GitHub link, you can see in the backend folder, you have this API, right? Go into this, and this is all you would need to do for today's session. So I want to create. Now you know that what is backend and how it is processed. Now let's make a backend application. Okay, I'll go to my uh, directory. You can go to any of your directory. I will take care of Flask. I'll just go to my backend. I have some stuff here. Okay, let me not do it here. I'll just make another directory. Flask, uh, Flask cd Flask session. Okay. Now I don't have anything. Okay, I have an empty directory. In here I'll do something called as, okay, if you want to follow along as well, you might want to install Flask. That you can do by pip install Flask. If you don't have it yet, okay, just run this command, pip install Flask, if you want to follow along. So that will install you the Flask. So what is Flask? Flask is basically a microservice framework. Okay. So what do you mean by microservices? It basically gives you everything that you need from scratch. It doesn't give you every. Oh, sorry. I mean the opposite. Basically, it doesn't give you everything. It just gives you basic, very simple skeleton. And whatever services you need, like whatever else do you need that are available in its libraries, you need to import it as from your side and do it. So if you have used Django, if anyone has used Django, whenever you start a Django project, right, it gives you an entire directory structure, right? Or even if you remember in React, whenever you started a React npm or let's say create React app, or you used White, so it gives you all those directories, right, called as src, then what do you say, this public, then HTML, something kind of like gives you all those directories, right? But Flux doesn't give you anything. It basically gives you a very simple skeleton, and from that, whatever services you need, you add it. Okay, so we are focusing on Flask because it's very simple, easy to use. Django is a bit more complicated, you can say. So after you have gotten used to Flask, you can focus on Django. Okay, all right. So assuming you must have installed Flask, I have this thing. Let's say I don't have. I just do app.py. I'll make a application. Okay. The first thing I want to do is, this is my backend application. So first thing I want to do is import Flask from Flask. Mix Flask. Yeah. Import Flask from Flask. Now I want to give a name to my application. Okay. Let's say I'm making an API, right? I'll give my name of my application as API. So I'll just do API equals Flask app. I think this is it. Let me just check the syntax. Look at yeah, Flask name. Sorry, my bad. No, this- okay. If I do this name, and then if name equals name, I'm gonna do API dot run. So this is the basic code that you need to start your Flask application. Okay. So what you are doing is just importing Flask. You are creating a application with your name called as API, and this is how the template code looks like. Okay, so this is called in Dundle when you are doing name. So if you're seeing your main application, like it's like your main function in any of your programs. So if your main function is accessed, what you're doing, you're just making your application run API dot run. Okay. Now let's add something here. Now what I want to do is, let me make some routes here. Yeah. If I'll just do this API dot route. I want to show you how a backend looks like. Okay, so let's say this thing, and then API dot route, let's say home. Okay. So what route means is, route is basically this basically gives you a URI or a URL that you want to visit. Whenever you visit this URI or URL, you'll get some response. Okay, and that response will be taken care under this. So if you do, if under, so when I'm using both routes here, like you can see slash and home slash home. So it basically means if I go to slash or if I go to slash home, I'll get the same page. Okay. So if I'll just go ahead and make a function, let's say home. Okay. And then I'll just simply return, okay, this, you have reached our backend, so something like this. Cool. Now if I save this, and if I do flask run, this is all you need to do. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I messed up with the syntax. It should be from flask import flask. Yeah. Sorry about that. Now if I do flask run, you can see. Let me just clear the screen. Run it again. Okay. Now you can see this is a development server. Debug mode is off. You can turn it on, and you can see your server is running on this site. HTTP 127.0.1, which is a local host, and this port is 5000. So if I open this site, see, now you'll see this message. Okay, you have reached our backend server. Okay, so now you can see, like, now you should realize the meaning of the route. Okay, so if I do slash home here, I'll also get the same result. Okay, now if I remove the slash home, this is basically, I'm just doing a simple slash. I'm not giving anything. Okay, this is my route, the root route. So if I do this, I'll also get the same. Okay, so now you must realize what our route was doing. Let me open another tab, the flask session. Sorry. Okay, when once you run your flask run, it will just generate some cache files in your Python. So just ignore this. This is nothing. So focus on app.py. If I open app.py, now you can see, if I just, okay, let's see what happens if I just comment it out. Okay, if I just comment it, and then run my this thing again. If I run my server again, now if I just refresh this, you'll see that this URL was not found, because there is, I am not taking care of anything that I'm not taking care of any route that will show me this slash. Okay, just the slash. It doesn't show me anything. Okay, now if I do, but now if I do slash home here, you'll see that, okay, you have reached our backend server. So this is the meaning of route basically. Whatever route, if you don't take care of, if I just do a random route here, it will say me URL not found. So whatever route you want to show on your web page, on your backend application, you have to define it via app.route. Okay. All right. So I hope this was clear. This is what route means basically. Now I'll just go ahead and uncomment this line. Okay. Cool. Okay. Now coming to let's, what should we do? Okay, we can go to dynamic URLs. Okay, dynamic routes basically. Okay, let's see routes. So this dynamic, as the name suggests, is basically your route will change every time. Okay, it will not be static. Like if you see this route, it's basically slash home, right? There's nothing more to it. If you visit slash home, this is what you will get. But in dynamic routes, the you can, you can accept a parameter in your URL itself, and based on that, you can do some manipulation on that parameter and show the response. So if I do dynamic route, I'll just do go ahead and make a route. Let's say my dynamic route, and in here, okay, I think I do have to pass it on like this. Yeah. So if I go visit my dynamic route, and okay, now there's you can do inner, like you can nest the URLs as much as you can. Okay. Now you can just make it anything random. There's nothing like you can just do slash home. If you want, you can do slash dynamic route slash. If I'll just show you here, I'll just make another API dot route, and then I'll do slash home, show home, something like that. Anything random. Okay. If I save this and run my flask again, All right, I missed the indentation. Sorry. In this route, I do have to write a method. Let's say dynamic return. As of now, let's just return hi, something like that. And if I run my app now, now if I do go to home, and in home I just go to my home. Is it not what I've done? Okay, show home. Sorry, you will also get this. Okay, so you can make nested URLs as well, not a problem. Nested routes basically. Okay, now coming to our dynamic routes. Let's say you want to accept some inputs in your URL itself. Okay, let's say I have something called as dynamic route, and then I want to accept an integer called as let's say marks. Okay, and then I'll take the marks here as well as argument in my function, and then let's say hi Bileshwar, I know your marks. Okay, and let's print the marks. Let's say str and then do marks. So whatever you are, let's say whatever it's we are accepting, we're just simply printing it. Okay. Now let's save it and then run our server again. Okay. Now in here, if I go to, I think it was dynamic route. In dynamic route, yeah, dynamic route. If I just a second. Now if I pass any number here, let's say three, it'll give me this. Hi Belisho, I know your marks. It'll send me as three. So it's accepting this thing as input and then it's showing here. So if I do some random number, three is three, 347, it will also show hi Belisho, I know your marks, this thing. So what you can do is basically this will helpful in some scenarios where you want to accept some input in your route itself. This is called a dynamic route, and in here you can do some processing and basically show it. So it's just a simple application. Let's say I want to check even odd using even or odd using dynamic routes. Okay, so I'll just say int num now. Okay, I'll accept it at num. Then I'll just do some processing. If num mod 2 equals 0, then return me this. Return you have processed or you have reached even number. Else return you have reached an odd number. Okay, now let's save this. And if I go here, it'll show me that you have reached an odd number. If I go do something even thing, it'll show me an even number. So this is just to show you how you can use dynamic routes and do some processing in your data. Okay, just I know it's sounding very simple now, but it will be useful in how we'll show you in the application at the next session when we'll show you how to make a trivia application. It will be useful in that. Okay. All right. Now let's go ahead. What else do we have? Let's go to this thing. Let's see what else do we have in here. Okay, introduction done, file structure done, end files, endpoints done, cost done, database models. Okay, HTTP method, JSON, curl. Okay, all this is done. Now I think we can go ahead with database. Okay, do you want to play anything else in here? Okay, no, I think we can go with database also. Okay, so if you remember this thing, our that I showed you in this online GDB, right? There was something called as the main.py and that API.py. In my API.py, what I had was a database and my logic. So you can see this is some logic that I'm implementing, right? This is some logic that I'm implementing. Let's say let it be very simple. So but this is hidden, this is private, this is running somewhere in here 127.0.1. Now if you run your front end somewhere else, let's say I have my front end in LUGVITC, something like that, and in from here I'm making a request to here, like an API request to here to my backend. No one would be able to see my backend, right? But they will get their desired response in the front end. So this is how you can implement some logic in your backend. Now let's go and implement the database part as well. The logic is done. Let's try with database. So for this session, we'll be showing you how to use SQLite database. Okay, SQLite, how to integrate it in your Flask. But if you want to make web applications more standard and all, it's generally suggested you. What like I use production databases like MySQL or PostgreSQL. But for this session, we'll just show you this SQLite. It's very simple and it's good. If you're a beginner, it's good to understand. Okay. Now I'll just go to my app.py. Okay. Now for this also, I think you need to install something called as Flask SQL Alchemy. Yeah. Okay. Just copy and paste it. If you're following along, you can install this. So this package basically allows you to use database SQLite database in Flask. Okay, so that's why it's called Flask SQL. Okay, now I already have it installed, so you can go ahead and install it. If not, then we can continue. Now in here, I'll just import it from Flask. I just see the syntax. I'm very bad at it. I think SQL Alchemy. Okay, from Flask SQL Alchemy. I think import SQL Alchemy. Right. Yeah, cool. Okay, now importing the package. Now I have to do some configurations. Okay, and before I want to use before I use my database, I want to do some configurations. So I'll just do this API config. I think it's API config, right? Yeah, API dot config. Right. Hmm. So what I have to do is I have to basically declare a secret key. Config my secret key. I think it is API dot secret key itself. Okay. Let me just do this secret key, and then it can equal to anything. My secret. So this is just a secret key that is used that is needed when you use a database. Basically, you can define anything as a secret key. It doesn't matter because your backend is entirely private. Okay, you're not showing it to the a person who is in the front end who is accessing your services. So you can use anything as a secret key, and then uh, API dot config. Then my database. I think I'll just copy it. It's a very big name. So API dot config. This thing I just tell you what it means basically. I don't even remember the syntax. Yeah. So API.config SQL Alchemy database URI. Okay. So what it says is basically you let's say you want to create a database with the name counter. Okay. If you remember, we did implement a counter application in the front end in the past session, right? So here we'll be showing you how to access that in the backend as well. So let's say I'm just making a counter. I'm making a database called as counter. Okay. So I'll just use this syntax. Let's say SQLite colon three slashes, three forward slashes, and the name of the thing that you want to give, name of the database counter.db, and then I have to just configure it. I just have to put it in configuration with my app and just say that SQL Alchemy database URI is this. Okay, my database is this. I'm just saying that okay, the database that I'm going to use, its name is counter.db, and I want you to remember that as a configuration feature. So this is what I'm doing. Okay, cool. So after this, I can do something called as DB. Let's create. Let's call them name this name our database which we are going to use in here called as DB, and then I just do DB equals SQL Alchemy, and then I just take this as input API. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm just making a model now. Okay. I'm importing this. I'm calling this function method called as SQL Alchemy, and I'm passing my app, which is the API, and I'm saying that I want to use a database. So I'm just storing it in the name called as DB. Okay. Now let's go ahead and make a database. So I think you must have taken your courses in database where you know all the data types and all. I'll keep it very simple as of now, but yeah, if you want, we can complicate it in the next sessions how to create more complex databases. But now we'll show you how to create a sample database with the record and all and set it. Okay. Now I've just initialized my DB called as SQL Alchemy.api. Now if I go here, create model, inside here I have to do it via a class called as, you can name anything, your class, doesn't matter. And then you have to take your db.model as input and do all of this. Okay. I can just copy this because bad at syntax. Okay. So in this create model, I'm just this is how you create a database. Okay, create a database model basically inside from your Flask code. So I'm just doing class and then naming my anything. You can name it as any of your name, whatever you want to do. I'm naming it as counter because it is more relatable. Then I'll just do db dot model. Dot model is common. DB is basically whatever name that you use here to initialize your database application from SQL Alchemy, and then you can just do db dot model. And in here, there is something, whenever you're making a database, you have to give us a primary key, right? Some record that has to be that serves the purpose of a primary key. So here I'm just giving us an identifier, and I'm just doing the db dot column. Then I'm saying that okay, this is a column, identifier is a column, and then it is of type integer. Okay, it is a type integer and it is my primary key. That's what I'm saying. Then I'm doing another column, current count. Okay, and then I'm making db, it's another column, it's also an integer, and it can't be null. Okay, while you're inside, you can't enter null values inside this current count. If you want, you can make it true and all, whatever, it's your call. So let's say my database currently has these two columns only. Okay, so this is how you can, if you want more, you can even do like, if you want more, you can do db dot string, then pass on the length of the string. If you want to do a string, let's say character or a string column, you can do add anything. Okay, it's the entire documentation now, it's available. But as of now, if we want to create a counter application, right, in the backend, let's see how that works. So for the counter application, what I need to do is I want to store the count value. Let's say initially, let's say the count value is 5. Okay, I want to store it in the database in this stuff called as counter, and I want to access it from this database, and then upgrade, increment it or decrement it, right? Okay, so this is how I have created the database. Now I have to make create the tables inside it. Like I have to create this counter table with this identifier and current count. I have just done. So how we can do it is, let's create another route for that. Okay, at the api dot route, then let's say something called as create db. Okay, cool. So if I go to create DB, and then I'll just do a def, what layer? Let's say create. If I go here, and what I will do is I will take, I'll just do DB dot create all, and I'll just return, hey, your database is now created. So what this tells us, whenever I visit the create DB, so it will there's a command called as create all. Okay, what it does, it basically creates your database model, whatever you have defined, and stores it in counter.db. So this route does, whenever you visit this route, it will just create that, and then it will return, hey, your database is now created. Okay, to make it better, and how you should actually do it, you should do it in a try block. You put it in a try block. Okay, it's in Python. Try catching. I think I'm good. I accept, right? I accept. And then you can return, sorry, your database should not be created. So what it does, it in the try except block, it actually tries to first run this command. If it is running well and good, it returns you this response. If there is some error, then you can run it in the except block and show you, sorry, the database could not be created. Okay, so as of now we have done this. We have given our model, like how our database should look. Now let's go ahead and run it, so that we can actually create our database. Okay, if we go to this route, create db, so it says me, hey, your database is now created. To make it more simple, I can just do it like this. Yeah, this is better. Now if I do a ls on my directory, you can see there is something called as counter.db. So now my database is actually made, no matter it's empty, but my columns and rows, all those has been defined, my database is defined. So this is done. Cool. Now let's try to put some entry into the database, right? So I'll open my app.py. Now our data is totally empty, like our database is empty. So what we'll do is we'll just make another route. So I hope you understand the meaning of routes, right? So whatever service you want to use, you can define different routes for that. Okay. So in here, I will just do api.route at 2db. sorry, write db maybe, yeah, write db, and then def add, yeah. Okay. Now what I want you to think is, see, now as of now, whatever we're doing till now, it was just get requests, right? There is nothing that you are passing from your URL to the backend. It was just simple get request. But in here, you're actually inserting a record, right? Inserting a record from your let's say this URL to the backend. So in here, you have to use a post request. So by default, whatever this requests that are being use, these are the get requests, so you need not take care of it. But since you need a post request now, what you have to do is you have to tell it specifically to accept a post request, get slash post. Okay. Now what it tells is, basically it tells to the add function that okay, you, this method can, this route basically write db can accept both get methods and post method. Post is necessary because we want to put some data into the application, right? Okay. Now in this, let's go to try first. Then what we'll do is add record, right? So we'll just make a sample name, let's say new record, let's say record equals request. Okay. Okay, let me first show you this. If request dot method equals get, then return this is a get method, get request. Okay. If else, if request dot method equals post, I'll return this is a post request. Save it. Okay, now I will just run my app, and if I do in here, if I go to write db, oh sorry, I forgot to import the package. So we are using request here, right? So we have to import it here also. And request. Now if you do, see, this tells you it's a get request, because what you are doing, you're just basically viewing the site from your browser, right? So you're not passing any data from it. So it basically shows you that okay, this is a get request. Now to pass it actually in a post request, we need to make a form, right? We need to show, like, we have to submit some data from this page into this database. So for that, we have to make a kind of HTML form, right? I hope you get the concept. So for making a HTML form, what you have to do is in Flask, if you want to, okay, first let me tell you this. Let me just not confuse you. If we go to this app.py, in here, if you're confused at why I'm using requested method equals get here and not anywhere else, it's because it was the, by default there is only a get method, right? So by default, whatever this code you are running, it's showing that whenever the get request is there, run all this code, right? This is what it means. But since here you have the option of both get and post, you have to specifically say that if I get a get request on this write.db, then show me that it's like do some code. Okay. And if it's a post request, then do some other code. So this is the get block basically. This is the, if you make a get request to this URL, this is the block that is executed. If you make a post request to this URL, this is the block that is executed. Okay. Now let's make a form. Let's make a form in here. In here you can pass the counter value so that it adds it to the database, right? Now how do you pass it? Basically, if you, let's say I want to add 5 to the counter, like I want to initialize the counter with 5, how do you do it from here? So you need something sort of a form, right? So this is what we'll do. I just make something called as templates. I'll make a directory called as templates. This is what I want to know. So whenever you're making any kind of HTML or any kind of PHP or something like that, any front end rendering that you want to do in Flask, that has to go inside this templates folder. Okay, you can't just do directly here vim write db.html and then just write some HTML code and you expect it to work. It won't work basically. You, every HTML file or everything that you want to see in your front end in your Flask, that has to go inside this template. Okay, this is how Flask works. So I just remove this write db or write HTML from here, and then I'll go inside templates. Okay, and I will make a file called as write db.html. Let me save some time and I'll just fetch the HTML code. I am pretty sure HTML is very simple. If I just do write db.html, it's nothing but I'm just making a form, right? Just Control Shift C, copy this, paste this. Now inside this form, I want to do enter the initial value of counter. Now I want to do it as input id equals let's say counter, name equals counter. Yeah, that's good. Okay, let's save this and then okay. Okay, now this is what I have in this write.html, right? Now what I want is whenever I make a get request to this URL, I should see this form, right? Then only I can enter, right? If I see this form, then only I can enter a simple value and then I can make a post request. So what I want is whenever I am making a get request to this, I should see this form that I have just designed. So what I will do, I'll just go to my vim app.py and I will where is it? Yeah, right DB. So what I'll do is instead of this message here, I just do this return render template and then I'll just do whatever the write db.html. Now when I run this, okay, render template is not defined. I have to import it. Let me see. Just like I imported request, I have to import render template also. Hmm. So see, this is the page that you get, right? So this is the page. This is the simplest HTML page that we wrote and we stored it in the template. And what we wanted is whenever there is a get request made to this page, I want this to be shown. Okay, I forgot to add a submit button, right? So that whenever you hit the submit button, the value gets added to the database. So I'll just go ahead and do a submit button. Oh, sorry, not here. It should be in my templates. Action equals this is what, right? Okay, this is necessary. The action basically tells that whenever you enter the submit button, where should it redirect? So I am basically making whenever I hit the submit button, I want to make a post request to the same URL. Okay, that's why I have written this write db.html. Now just do button type equals submit. Just do enter into the. Now if I re-render, okay, I stopped the server. Let me run the Flask server again. I have this button called as enter into DB. Okay. Now let's just okay. Whenever you have your Flask running, right? Let's say I make a request. I'll just reload this. I make a request. It will show you this thing. Okay. There was a request made and it's a get request. Okay. It shows the right into the right DB. I made a get request. Now if I want to enter any value, let's say 5, and I want to enter into DB, it will say me. Okay. It's also get. Hmm, am I doing something wrong? URL was okay. Okay. Let me go to my just a sec, guys. Let me just Google this thing. Post request site in Flask. Not processing community request return Flask. I'll just take more 10 to 15 minutes so that we can see how to add to the database and how to view the database. Okay. just 10 to 15 minutes more. Mm, this post itself. Oops, in this right db.html, it should be the route basically. That was what I was missing. Instead of right db.html, it should be what is my route? Right db. Right db. Hmm. So if I save this now, I do flask run, and if first of all let me play this, and then I'll just do. Let me make a get request. This is what I get, and if I enter 5, this is also should be a post request. Okay, okay, I forgot here. I had to add this thing specifically here as a method equals post as well. Sorry, guys. So we have to add the method equals post as well, and then the action also, so that the form knows when you enter the submit button, it should enter. It should basically process a post request. Right now, hopefully, it should work. If I enter 5. Okay. Now, when I do this get thing, whenever I just simply make a request here, okay, this is showing me this. I just want to show you this again. Now, if I do write db, so this is simply a get request, right? I'm just visiting this URL, so it shows me that okay, this user wants to do this as a get request. But the moment I enter 5 or any value that I want, an initial value of my counter, and enter the submit button. Okay, so in this, what happens when I hit the submit button is, in my HTML code, I have said that whenever the submit button is clicked, a post request should be sent to this URL, okay, which is the same, right? db.url. So whenever we are entering the submit, a post request is actually sent. Okay, this is what your HTML seeks. Now, if you remember, we handled the post request in some way, which was here. Yeah. When So here we are seeing if requested method equals for post, it gives me that this is a post request. So whenever I do this, this tells me that okay, this is a post request. Now, so now what we have is, we have the value that the user wants to enter. Now we have to like push that value into the database, right? Now what I have to do is, let's say that I have a CTR that says that request dot form of counter. This, what it says is, the whatever request you are getting to this URL, in that there should be a form, because we have implemented a form, right? So in that form, search for the field called as counter. So search for the div or the ID with the name or with the ID counter, okay, and then store its value to CTL. So if you see, just let me go there, Flask session, CD templates, and if I open my this DB, I should have yeah, I have mentioned it as count, right? My ID and name. So in here, I'm taking that value, right, 5. So that value, I'm processing it like this, request.form counter. So inside my counter, I have this value called as 5 now, because I've entered that. Now my work is to push it into the database, right? So what I will do is, I will make a record that says the name, whatever you have given, counter, right? This name of the model that you have given, the name of the database. So you have to do it that counter, and then whatever the fields that is required. So an identifier is required, right? So for an identifier, let me give us any random integer. Let's say 123. This is my identifier for this. This is my primary key, right? So I have given anything like that, and then the current count. So you want your current count to be CTR, right? That's what you have received. So let's say I have created a variable called as record with these values. Now I want to do db dot add. I think, let me see the correct syntax again. Um, I think it's db dot session dot comment. That's last. Db dot session dot add record. Yeah. So if I do db dot session dot add and I do the record. So what it's doing is db. If you remember, db is our database variable, right? So inside this current session, I'm adding this. I'm adding this record. So there was nothing in my database. So I'm adding this record with this identifier 123 and my counter as 5 initial value. Then I'll just do db dot session dot commit, right? Yeah, session dot commit, session dot commit. This is basically to make sure I'm putting into the database. And once all of this is done, I'll just return, okay, okay, your value was inserted into the database. Okay. Now, if I run this Flask thing, okay, now if I just go to this again, byte db, oops, byte db, gives me this get request because I'm doing get request. If I enter 5 and then enter into db, another error takes into one position again, but 3 by given. Okay, something else. Two, three, current contract, that's how it's done. Check 1 second, guys. Okay. Yeah, it should work. Let me just search the Google search. Hold on. The passing position argument. Okay, okay, okay. Let me try this. So it says me to specify the name as well. So I will do identifier equals 123 and then current count equals CTR. Okay, now this should work. Let's see. Task run. And then first we'll just do a simple. Just do a get request. Now we'll enter a value. Okay. Now it says okay, your value is entered into the database. Now in our database we have a current counter value. Okay. Now let's first view that. Now let's view our database. What do we have in our database? Okay. I'll just make another route for that again. The rate API dot route. Then sorry, view DB. Inside view db, let me I don't really need a get post method here, right? Because I'm just gonna see what is there, what is in the database. So I'm not passing any data from my site to into the backend. So I'll just give it a get request, and in here I will see view. I'll just make a function called as view, and then I will return. Okay, first let me fetch it. So let me give a variable. Okay, let's say current count or CTR. CTR equals, I have to mention the name of the database, that is count. Then I have to do query. So I'm executing a query in that database. So I have to do query. Then I will do filter. In that filter, or if I can also do filter by, yeah, filter by. Then I'll just use, I think, what is our name? Identifier, right? Identifier equals 123 dot all. Okay, now what does this mean is inside our database, which is count, we are executing a query, and then we are using a filter by clause, and then in here I'm passing that the identifier should be 123. Okay, so if you remember when we inserted our record, we passed it with the primary key 123. So based on that, I'm fetching this record. Okay, it's similar to your SQL statements where you put a where clause, right? It's similar filter by, and once I have that CTR, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just do this return. Hey, the current value in your database is. Then I'm gonna do CTR dot. It should be CTR dot current count. So CTR is basically an object that your database returns, and inside that you should have an identifier CTR dot identifier then CTR dot current count. So I need the CTR dot current count, right? So this is how it should be working. Let's check out. I'll run my server again. Okay, now if I just do view db, it's not defined. Just a second. Okay, is it counter though? Let me check. Oh, sorry, it's counter actually. The name of the database is counter. I'm giving it this count. Hmm. Counter. No, this should be working. Okay, one more thing. This is what you see, right? Internal server error. So if okay, I cleared the data. Shit, I cleared it. But if you have noticed, the error code that it was showing, it was 500, right? So 500. If you remember from the HTTP codes that we like went through, 500 was for server side errors. So this is the error that happened in the server side, right? In the backend. So for those errors, like there is no fault of client here. He's just visiting a regular that like viewdb exists, and he's just visiting that. But your server is having some fault, that's why it's showing this internal server error. And for this thing, the HTTP code is 500. Okay. Now if I do flask run again, and if I run this, list has no attribute current count. Okay, let me check the code again. Let me just print the list in here. Let's see. I think that's should be one more. So it's saying me it's actually a list. So I'm trying to save it as a list. Index out of range. Okay. Let me do CTR 0. Okay, let me just try to print the CTR first. And then let me try to do it here. Let's see what happens. Run my code again. And then visit it here. Can only concatenate string to str. Okay, okay. Let me do it as str here. I think it's an integer. Counter 1 2 3. Yeah, it should work, right? Okay, 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 got it. Okay, so got it. So what happened was when you're using this all clause, right? What it gives you is it gives you a list, and in that list it returns you all those identifiers which has 1 2 3. But in here we have just one identifier, right? That's why we have in the list it returns a list of all those identifiers. So in the list, our current we are targeting on the first position. Like we have only one record. For simplicity, I can even remove this. This should work now. If I do ctr.current count, it should work. Plus count. This query has no attribute. Ah, sorry guys. I think I'll do it again. It's all. Let's see in here. CTR dot 0 dot CTR of 0 of, let's say, 1. Let's see what it gives. Counter is not subscripted. Um, Let me, okay, there is some error that I'll try to fix it up, but dot error, and just let me print this counter of 0. This, yeah, so, yeah, let me save it out first. Flask run. Okay, you can see this object, right? It says that counter 123. 123 is our identifier. But let me see how to view record. Let me just check view db str query filter by dot all. Yeah, this should work, but for some reason it's not working. I'll just see. I maybe something wrong in the syntax. But when you just this is the result that you get when you run the query, right? So it tells you that there is a record with the identifier 123, and inside that there should be the value called as 5. So it's not printing basically because maybe I have made some syntax errors for which I'm not able to access the value. But this is what you have in a database, right? So here in this thing, what we saw is how to make how to implement your logic in the backend, like work with all the routes. Then yeah, how to work with get request and post requests. Make your make a template, or how to write to your database. How we saw that how you can make your database and then make all those columns in database, then create the database, then write to it based on your get method or your post method. And while you are writing, you can also view it. View, there is some error, but I'll surely get it fixed up. But yeah, so we are actually writing
Yeah,
to
maybe
database.
you can try CTR0 dot get count, the other
Yeah,
method that you are using.
yeah, CTR 0 dot get count. CTR 0 dot current count. This is what you mean, right? Okay, this should also might work. Let's see. Just make a request here. Yeah, great. Thanks for the. I think it was Srivastava, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Srivastava. Okay, now you can see this is what you have in your database. Say the current value in your database is 4. So some syntax, right? I have lost, like I haven't coded since long in Flask, so I don't remember the proper syntax. But the logic that you get is here, like how you can view the value that is in your database. Just do a CTR0, and then on that you find the current count. Now you can make functions to even increment and decrement it. That shouldn't take much time. We'll just do it here. Matter of 5 minutes. Just I'll take 5 moments. Okay. Let's say increment count. Increment count here. Please, name of Rasat. 1 second, guys. I'll just keep that. Yeah. So I was just giving attendance. So I'll just increment. Just make an increment function. Let's say I want to first, I want to increment it by 1, right? So I'll just again fetch the current value, filter by, then identifier equals 123, then dot all. Now I have to do CTR, let's say updated CTR. Okay, updated CTR equals CTR 0 dot current count plus CTR plus 1. Yeah. Or better way, I can just do it this way itself. CTR 0 dot current count equals, I'm just incrementing it by 1, whatever it's the value is. Okay. and then I just write it to the database. I think I just have to commit it. I'll just see once. Yeah, I just simply have to commit it. Then I'll do db dot session dot commit, and I'll just return. Okay, uh, your value was your count value is incremented. Now, similarly for decrement function, we also just same logic with just a minus thing. Decrement count, and I will just do it as -1. Okay, decrement. Now let's save this, and hopefully, if everything is all
To
right.
change the name of function.
Oh yeah, yes, right. Yeah, yeah. Fair point. I have to change the function name. Here I've added increment. I should add it as decrement. All right. Now if I run, I do it as view db, and then if I do increment db, what what row did I use? Oh, increment count. Second, increment count. Okay, your value is incremented. Now if I will go to view db, let's say, see, now from 4 it became 5. So now if I do again, let's say increment again, I hit increment count again, then I just reload it again and again and again. Again. Okay, I've incremented it multiple times. Now if I view it, see, I've done it so many times that my database is now incremented. Like my current value, it was from 4 till it went till 19. Now if I do decrement count, it's also decremented. Let me do it a few more times. Now if I do it's view db, so now my value is decremented. So here we are actually implementing a current operation. We have our data. We created the database. We added the records, updated the records, and then deleted also. Deleting we can take care of. We can also delete. But yeah, updation and all is important. So the counter application that you saw in the front end last time, this is how you should handle it in the back end. In the next session, what we'll do is we'll integrate both that front end and this back end. So from your front end, you can use your add. You can click on the increment button, and that will make a request to this backend. It will increment here via a route. It will increment the count in your database and then decrement and then do that all that stuff. So the session 2 was about all front end. Session 3 is all about backend. Next session is about the integration. Okay, that is basically clear to all the things that you need to know about APIs. And let's start with web apps. So yeah, I think this sums up everything. Do you have any doubts, guys? If you're still
So
here,
yeah, the
yeah.
database file, is that a plain text file or some other format?
No, it's not a plain text file. It's a .db file, right? It's only viewable with database readers. If you see, if I just open it, just open it here, home, and then Flask, right? Flask session. If I can't just open it with random thing, it won't show you anything. Okay, it says if it even says you that you can't open it with builder or something. And if you want, I can just do a cat. Let's see what it has. क्या नाम है इसका? Cat counter. Yeah, so it gives you this thing like you can at least understand something. There is a primary key. There is called as identifier. There is this current count and all that. But the database, the data that it stores, it doesn't show you that. Okay, it's just visible if you like open it with some data viewer app, database viewer app that will show you the database. All right. Okay, guys. Anything else? I know it was a bit like the error debugging, all of that stuff. It was a bit hectic because I haven't been using it since long, and it was a bit hectic. So I hope were you able to get the concept of how to use backend and write some codes, the routes and all, get request, post request.
Yes, bro.
Okay. All right. I think this is the end. So if you don't have any doubts or if you want to give any feedback, you can. Else, you can leave, guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Bhaiya.
Thank you, Suyat sir.